your walk and in your everyday life as a Christian, prayer is foundational. So foundational means I try to begin my day with prayer at 6 in the morning or whenever I get up. So it's the first thing I do in the morning. It's the first thing I do, and it's the old simple formula of adoration, confession, testimony, and supplication or request. Is kind of the script that I follow. I start with adoration or praise, always thanking the Lord for how faithful He has been, and not only providing for our needs, but over and above our needs. So as prayer being such an integral part of my life and how I exist, and really dependent on spiritual guidance, it is how I walk and function daily. So as I've gone through life, discernment through prayer and fasting on should I quit my job in 1986 at a Fortune 10 company with an annual income of $100,000, which was a lot of money in 1986, to become a car salesman, required prayer and fasting. It requires discernment because sometimes your ego gets in the way. Sometimes you have to really sort out, is this Nate's goal or is this really what the Lord wants me to do? So throughout life, from 86 until now, I've always said that we have what I call, or some authors will call, Christian writers will call, crisis of belief. And a crisis of belief is when the Lord will allow roadblocks to enter your life, to challenge your faith, to see, are you willing to be dependent on Him, or are you only willing to be dependent on what you are capable of doing yourself? If I own 60 apartments and I have positive cash flow of $5,000 or $10,000 per month, and my bills are $3,000, it's really, really easy to decide, keep the apartment buildings, live on the positive cash flow, get any kind of job, and you're living pretty good. It takes a faith walk or a journey, part of the faith walk journey, to sell those apartments and say, I'm going to take this $120,000, $30,000 I borrowed from my dad, so $150,000, and by faith, leap and leave corporate America, where I've been pretty successful, to buy a car dealership that I know nothing about. So over the years, because the Lord has consistently delivered me, consistently provided for our needs and over and above our needs, even with, going from $100,000 a year with no children to $35,000, $36,000 a year with 3 kids and a wife with no job, not working, being a full-time mom, that tries your faith, right? Because now all of a sudden, all the lessons that you've learned on stewardship and saving and how to manage resources come into play. Throughout the last 35 years, so the first leap of faith is, to quit your big corporate job. The second one is to invest in a dealership and relocate your family to Chicago. The next one is in buying out your partner and going to the bank and saying, hey, I have $1.8 million in assets, but I need a $1 million loan, which is greater than 1-to-1. And, then the next one was, when I got the loan, I asked for a 20-year amortization. They thought I had lost my mind. They said, no, we only loan money for 60 to, at most, 84 months. And I said, well, the car business is too cyclical, and I need a very low payment, so I need a 20-year amortization. But I'll do this. I'll give you 30% of profit per year if you will loan me this $1 million. So they loaned me the $1 million on a 20-year amortization, which is really unheard of. I gave them the 30% of profit, so we paid it off in 3 years. And that was, like I said, back in '94, when $1 million was a lot of money. It's a lot of money today, but it was a lot of money in 1994 through '97. So the prayer journey is just having the faith and the confidence as a result of prayer to go to the bank and ask. make the ask. It's like a salesperson. Sometimes you just say, you know, the customer come in and say, I want a $300 payment and I want a $60,000 SUV. Well, Mr. Customer, if you divide 60,000 by 36 months, how much is that per month with 0 interest? Oh, what if we divide it by 60 months? Oh, that's $1,000 a month. It's 0 interest. Oh, so that's how big my asks were of the Lord. That's how big my asks were to the bank. So I went in and said, hey, give me a 20-year amortization. So you imagine somebody coming in wanting a car saying, hey, I want a 20-year amortization on a $100,000 car, which we have nowadays. You go, what? Get out of here. But the bank didn't throw me out, thank goodness. And then the same thing, you know, when we went and built 𝐻𝐭𝐿𝐻. You know, all the banks in 08, 010 withdrew. You know, dealers were losing their floor plan. 25%, over 25% of dealers went out of business nationwide. You know, and when we lost our line of credit for the construction loan, it was devastating. It was emotionally painful. And you know, it was a gut check. It's like, Lord, don't fail me now, right? I've been on this road for a long time, but it doesn't mean anything if I lose it all right here in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So, you know, just by prayer, we waited, and it doesn't always come in your timing, right? So the first bank loan in 1994 for the $1 million over 20 years, you know, that went pretty smooth. But this bank loan did not go smooth. We actually had to stop construction. So we stopped construction because we ran out of money and had no bank loan. And it took us almost 90 days to resume. You know, so you know, that's a journey of prayer walk, right? Because now all of a sudden we have to live into our testimony that we're believing the Lord will provide all our needs and over and above our needs and what we need. And I needed a construction loan. And, you know, by September, we got a construction loan and we're able to complete the project, you know, paid it off quickly, and the rest is history, as they say. So that journey continues and continues. Open points are when an auto manufacturer is going to build a new location. They call that an open point. So they have no market representation in a specific area. So when Honda Kenosha became available, it was an open point. Now, if you have to buy a dealership, an existing dealership, they cost millions and millions of dollars. And I quite candidly did not have the money. So let's just say a Honda Kenosha was going to cost $10 million. Well, I did not have $10 million to give a guy in Goodwill or Blue Sky. But it was an open point. I had to build a building. So by grace, we were awarded that point. Continuing to pray, continuing to walk by faith. Fast forward 5 years, and a second open point became available in Minneapolis. Coon Rapids, Minnesota, which is 35 miles northwest of Minneapolis. And very large dealership, you know, and they had actually, of course, they get a ton of applications, 60 to 100 applications, and they narrow it down to 10 guys to get an interview. And from there, they narrow it down to finalists, and then they award the point. Well, again, an open point is worth arguably $10 to $20 million is what that franchise is worth. So we're praying through the process of, do we even apply? Well, in Kenosha, our planning volume, we're expected to sell about 800 units, and we sold over 1,000 our first year. So we far exceeded our sales requirement. And manufacturers want you to sell new cars. So our Ford dealership had over 30 years consecutive running of 130% sales effective, and we were over 130% sales effective in Kenosha every year we were in business. So when Rapids, Minnesota became available, I asked, do we have a prayer getting the dealership? And they said, yeah, you have a chance. So I applied, and then I went to buy land, and the realtor said, no one's giving options on land. So it turns out they had given options on land, and 3 billionaires had applied. The company that built Bechtel Construction has a private equity company that owns car dealerships. Bechtel Construction built Hoover Dam. You know, it's a privately held family. That's a private family. The family owns it. And they applied for the dealership. And the owner, the owner of the Minnesota Twins, has dealerships in Minneapolis. He owns Porsche, Audi, BMW, Mercedes. and a Dodge Chrysler Jeep dealership right down the street, right in Coon Rapids, Minnesota. He applied. And then the third billionaire is a auto group by the name of Luther, who has like 60 dealerships. They took Dairy Queen, sold Dairy Queen. They owned Dairy Queen and sold it to Warren Buffett, and they also owned Nationwide Rental Car and took it public. So there were 3 billionaires applied, and Nate Sutton. And we got the dealership by faith. So when I went back to buy the land, there was no land available. And the guy said, well, we gave an option to this gentleman. I said, well, why would you tell me you weren't given an option? They said, Nate, we had applications from 3 billionaires and you. Who would you pick? So anyway, we were successful in getting the land and built the building. And so prayer is a way of life. Prayer is not ever looked at as an option or a convenience. It's a privilege to pause and begin the day in prayer. Okay, so our goal is to give more than we keep, right? So I'm surprised that it's more challenging to give than you would think, right? Because, and by that I mean there are 100 applicants for every dollar, if that makes any sense. So we started out foundationally as saying, okay, number one, we're going to give to Christian organizations. Number two, we're going to give to community organizations. And then number three, we're going to do some general philanthropic help here and there, i.e. scholarships, right? So 90+% of what we do is need-based, but it's not always need. I mean, it could be a school teacher, 2 school teachers sending their kid to college, and they make $50,000 each, but to send a kid to college and the tuition's $42,000, that's a lot of money for 2 school teachers. And that student, even though their parents are professionals, is still eligible for a scholarship. So it's not totally need-based. In terms of organizations, we look for efficiency. So we are looking for not-for-profits with admin costs, ideally single digit, but less than 20%. If admin costs are over 20, you simply typically do not qualify for a grant. And then those are the criterion. So need and efficient operations. So we really look for and organizations that are in a lot of need. We are partnering, one of our new partners we're looking at taking on, is called Manna Nutrition, M-A-N-N-A Nutrition. It's a not-for-profit out of Georgia. And they make nutrient packs, which are peanut butter based, high protein for malnutrition, undernourished children. And it's a wonderful not-for-profit, but they provide, so we do work I mentioned earlier in Angola, Africa, with advancing the gospel in Angola. So with AGA, we will buy a rail car load of that food supplement to feed to the children and adults waiting on health care, because oftentimes children and adults in countries like Gaza right now are so undernourished, they are not in a position to accept medical care because they can't even take their blood pressure, right? They can't take an IV. They're just so malnutrition. So the first step is to feed them, get them healthy, and that process can take up to 3 weeks. So those are the type of organizations we look for. We call it boots on the ground, and then we have boots on the ground that the big challenge with international donations is pilferage. Quite candidly, there is a lot of unfortunate theft. So we have boots on the ground that actually meet the rail car, take the rail car to our private facility, and dispatch the food and whatever we're shipping over from there. What I'd like our daughters and our family members to embrace on giving and stewardship is try to give more than you keep. Try to give more than you keep because you have enough. So first define how much is enough, and then once you define how much is enough, then be generous in your giving. So generosity and compassion, be compassionate for those. So we work with inner city in Rosewood after school programs. We have summer programs we're working with down, it's called the Agape Center in Roseland. We work with the Salvation Army. We work with drug rehab facilities. We work with women out of sex trafficking, out of trafficking facilities. Those are the type of facilities in Metro Chicago that we support because they're run very efficiently. But you know, that's why I say be compassionate for people's condition of the environment. So as you look at stewardship, it's not just giving a check. Sometimes it's your time and your talent. And when you give your time and your talent, you have to drill down and get involved to say, okay, what are they really doing down here? So when you go to Roseland, you have to drill down. Don't just send them a check. Understand what the after-school program involves. Understand what their summer program involves and why it's important to train children, teenagers, that they need to get a job, you know, and what it means to work for an hourly wage. And even though they're only paying them $2 or $3 an hour or some minimal number, the point here is, you know, go rake leaves, go pick up can, go pick up trash. You're training them that there is no one out there waiting to give you a free ride in life. You have to work. The women that get caught up in trafficking, oftentimes is, you know, they didn't choose that life and they're just looking for a way out and a new start. And so the organization we work with does a really good job in giving them a way out safely. Some of them, of course, it's not quite that easy. You know, the law enforcement has to be involved. But those organizations that are targeted toward helping people in what we call in our backyard, we try to partner with and we can support.